Portia Scott Media would like to dedicate today's show to Chadwick Boseman. Our heart and prayers go out to his friends and family. We know him for the incredible roles he played as Jackie Robinson, James Brown, and Thurgood Marshall. But for my 6-year-old Black son and many 6-year-old Black boys, and many of us in the Black community, we know him as Black Panther or King T'Challa because my son was able to go to a movie and see a superhero that looked like him. His life has always been changed from then. While we know Black Panther, played by Chadwick, was a fictional place, a fictional character, and Wakanda was a fictional place, he showed the world and reminded us of the brilliance and excellence of being Black. He gave us hope. Hello, darlings, and welcome to this week's show, Wake Up Well. I am your host, Portia Scott. I am so excited that you guys are here with us today because we have one of my regular co-hosts, but we also have a very special guest, and we are going to talk about understanding mental health. We are answering your questions around mental health and mental illness. I think this is a show that I've wanted to do for so very, very long, to really get into the details of what does mental health mean? What is mental illness? All the questions that we have, especially in the Black community, so that we can, in fact, eradicate the stigma around those issues. So, you guys, I want to know, as always, what are you grateful for today? What are you grateful for? I will tell you guys that just like you guys saw in the picture before the show started, I am grateful that ABC is putting on Black Panther tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time. It is going to be uninterrupted, and then they are having a celebration for Chadwick Boseman after that. So that is what I'm grateful for, so that we can still continue the story that he started. So you guys, let me know, what are you grateful for in the comments? Hello, I know Trisha's on. Hello, darling. Thank you for joining. Beanie is on. Thank you so much for joining, darling, all the way from California. So you guys, let me know, what are you grateful for? My friends that are on YouTube, comment, let us know, what are you grateful for? I know a couple of you guys are on. Also, we want to make sure that you're following us on YouTube at Portia Scott Media. Portia Scott Media. Head over there and follow us if you are not following already. So listen, guys, one of the things that we love to do around here is communicate with our community, to let you know when we're going to live, to give you inspiration as well as tools so that you can live intentionally. So if you text the word hello to 404-737-0867, you will join our community. Literally, you can text me and it will come directly to my phone. So one of the things that we're also going to do is make sure that we put a link in there as well in the comments as the show goes on. So you can just click that link and then you can sign up right there. It is also in the details of the Facebook post. Jasmine is on. Hello, darling. She said, I'm grateful for supportive parents. Absolutely. Gotta send a shout out to my parents who have been married for 40 years. Yesterday made their 40-year wedding anniversary. Listen, I've been married for 15 years. I hope to be married for 40 years. And I am just so proud that I have parents that are an example of that. Raymond Jones is on. Hello, darling. Thank you so much for joining. So you guys, I don't want to delay this any longer. I want to go ahead and bring on my co-host and our special guest for today. If you have not done this already, listen, you want to share this broadcast. It is a discussion that you do not want to miss. Hello, Pamela. Thank you so much for joining, darling. She is grateful for health and family. Yes, yes, yes. Raymond says, I'm grateful for my wife. Raymond, I am so grateful for your wife as well. I love Val. Yes, yes, yes. So let's get it started. I'm going to bring on my first co-host, Marty Sellers.
Hey, what's going on, Portia? How are you?
Good, Marty. How are you?
Doing amazing. I can't complain out here in California.
I know, I know. What is the weather like, actually?
You know what? We are not in the triple digits, so it is great.
Okay.
Anything below 100, so
It's
we're
good.
we're hovering high 80s, low 90s. It's good.
Got it.
We're
Perfect. So
not on
I want to
fire
give,
either.
you know what? I actually want you to give a little introduction of our next guest because you know her very, very well. So
Yes.
introduce our next guest.
Okay, good. Our next guest, she is my sister. Love her to death, and she is definitely. We have this wonderful, friendly competition, but it's so great because we're competing in the same field. She loves people. She and I are definitely go back and forth with how we help people. So proud of her in all of her endeavors. Her children are like my children, vice versa, and glad to have none other than Dr. Lisa Galoni.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You guys don't know. We've been trying to have Lisa on. We've been talking through like, when are we going to have her
Right.
on? When are we going to have her on? So I'm so excited that you get to be here. Doc, you know we miss you, but he
Yes.
needs a week off. So Lisa, I'm glad you are standing in as our special guest, but also as one of the co-hosts. So thank you, darling, for joining us today.
Yes.
So, one of the things we always love to do is what are you grateful for? So, Marty, what are you grateful for in this magnificent Sunday?
And on this Sunday, I'm grateful for, like so many, family. And if nothing else, 2020, although it has been a difficult year for all of us, what has been amazing has reminded me the value of family. Our siblings and I think we have become much closer to see the loved ones and to be able to talk to them. I lost a pioneer in our family. Lisa and I, one of our aunts passed away on yesterday, but just to know that we have family and all of that, her suffering is over and that we have each other to lean on during these times. It's all of it means everything to all of us. So to know that we have family, extended family, friends who have become family, that means more than anything to me.
Absolutely. I love that. And my prayers are just going out to you and your family, and
Thank
my
you.
condolences, Marty. And Lisa, tell us what you're grateful for.
Well, I'm going to have to piggyback off of Marty because the first thing I think of is family.
Mhm.
As we get older, I think we get closer. There's not a week I don't go by that I'm not calling one of my siblings. I come from a very large family, and I'm very
Mhm.
grateful for that. And I think as I get older, I get more grateful each year. We really try to connect on a regular basis, but it's hard when people are spread out. But yeah, I gotta go with family.
I love it. I love all of that. So, thank you just again for being on the show. I want to jump into the discussion. As I was thinking about this, I'm telling you, over the course since March, we started doing this show in March. And
Mhm.
just from March, COVID, the racial injustice, just over and over and over again, just traumatic event, traumatic event. And I think that people, can I just say I'm tired? Like,
Mhm.
I'm tired, and
Yes.
sometime I have to talk myself into like, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I'm the inspiration and empowerment lady,
Mhm.
but it's sometimes it's so much.
It's
And I
overwhelming at
can
times.
only imagine what the world is going through and trying to navigate this. So I thought it was important that we really, really talk about mental health. We also see things on the news about mental illness and what that difference looks like and what does all that mean, you know?
Mhm.
And so, Lisa, I know you're definitely going to help us with that, but I actually want to know what sent you into this field, particularly mental health.
I've been in mental health as a nurse for about 27 years. So I've been close to mental health for a while. And initially, I just kind of fell into it, to be honest. But as I got older, I see, I think we have more awareness now of the
Mm-hmm.
mental health issues. And then when you're personally affected by it, it made me want to get more educated because
Mm-hmm.
I found out that, wait a minute, this is a brain-based issue.
Mm-hmm.
We're so focused on physical issues, but not mental issues, and they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Physical issues affect mental health and vice versa.
Mm.
So, I'm very interested in how maybe we can get into it later, how the brain works and
Mm-hmm.
how it really can disrupt. It can be your best friend or your enemy, but it can really
Yes.
disrupt your life
Yeah.
in so many aspects. So, and that's
I
why I went back to school to do psychiatric nurse practitioner.
Yes, I love that. So let's actually get into that now. Let's talk about that brain, right? Because we talk so much about the physical. I know to diet, I know to exercise for my physical, but how do I manage that brain component? And is there something that I can do, you know?
Mm.
And so talk about what you were saying about how that is the disruption of the brain and how all that brain works.
Without getting too much into the sciences, I guess for layman terms, we have what's called the limbic system. And the
Mm-hmm.
limbic system is made up of a collection of structures. The hypothalamus, amygdala, the thalamus, and all these things are actually regulated by chemicals. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, our amygdala, if we have too much of it, a chemical there, that's where anger, violence, fear, anxiety comes from. And then just the opposite, if we don't have enough, then we get into disinhibited type of behavior or doing daring things, dangerous
Mm-hmm.
things without even understanding the consequences. And, I know everybody's heard of the neurotransmitters, serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine. Those
Mm-hmm.
are real chemical imbalances that play a part where we can feel sad or we can
Mm,
be not pleasured, have no
Mm-hmm.
disinterest. You have one person that's really interested in something, and then a year later they have total disinterest in the same thing. Well, there's something going on with the dopamine there, and
mm.
there are things that we can do to help those imbalances. So, like I said earlier, it's really fascinating what the brain does, and I think we need to understand it a little bit more to help also with the stigma.
Absolutely. And so when you talk about that dopamine, is that something? So if I say, prior to all of this happening, I didn't really have, I could get up and go and things like that. But as things start happening, does that have to do with dopamine, or does that kind of have to do with situational? And so,
Yeah, I think you have to look at not necessarily, you have to look at it as a holistic approach. When I
Mm-hmm.
see
mm,
patients, I'm looking at everything. The first thing you want to do is make sure you're getting some good labs, to figure
Mm-hmm.
out if this is, and rule out any physical issues. But the
right.
dopamine is what we call the reward system. So that's why, that you've seen probably MRIs maybe with someone who's had cocaine, and it just
Hmm.
lights up the brain because it's a reward system.
Right.
And my brain is probably food that lights up.
Yep, me too.
But
All of us.
so sometimes we have too much dopamine, sometimes not enough. So yeah.
Lisa and I were talking, that really is like what Doc always talks about, that whole TLC, total lifestyle change, and
Hmm.
making sure that we're having that triangle. Lisa and I were having
Right.
a fascinating conversation earlier today about, we got to think the brain is a muscle. And
Hmm.
that's probably one of the muscles we least exercise
Right.
or think about it in that regards. So what are we doing to be proactive and preventative in our mental health so that we're, instead of being reactive all the time? Just like we work out this physical body, we have to
Hmm.
work out our brain, our mental bodies as well. And just imagine if we start learning and understanding that better and say, what are the mental exercises I'm doing? What am I doing to make sure I'm not stressed? What am I doing to? And Doc talks about, making sure we're eating right, making sure we're having the right physical activities, making sure that we're doing that meditation and prayer, all
Right.
that triangle that he's talking about, that triangular approach. And imagine if we did that constantly, what we could do to help relieve and get to a better understanding of our own mental health.
Right. I have a couple questions. Like it's so many going through my mind right now. But one is I'm gonna make a statement. I listened to a TED Talk literally like 2 weeks ago by a doctor, Dr. Daniel Amen. And it's a great TED Talk because he talks about exactly what you're talking about, Lisa, is that he has done like 83,000 MRIs, brain scans. And his question was, why don't we scan the brain the way that we scan the body for different
Yes.
things? Because
Yes.
I guess in your feeling, you can kind of speak to this and, psychiatry and all of that stuff, for you, Marty, mental health, it's kind of going off of kind of what you're hearing, but not necessarily what you're seeing internally. So it's so good, Lisa, that you talked about, that dopamine and seeing that.
Yes.
And so to segue into that, Pamela asked, why aren't there more labs to determine when we are at risk?
Good question.
Yeah.
Lisa.
Well,
That's why she's the PhD.
well, I think it depends on who your provider is. A lot of people get their mental health needs from their primary care provider, which that's the first maybe contact that maybe there's something going on. But I would highly recommend that you go to either a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner who can really hone in, because that's their specialty. So, if you had an issue with diabetes, you're going to go to an endocrinologist. If you're going to have something going on cardiac, you'll go to a cardiologist. So it's the same thing. You go and you're having something going on mental health wise. I would go to, well, it depends on what it is, a neurologist or a psychiatrist. But there are some things that you can do. Baseline labs. And for example, with schizophrenia, one of the first things you'll do is an MRI or a CT, just to rule out any tumors. Syphilis, syphilis can mimic in the later stages schizophrenia type of behavior. So you got to rule out everything. And I think it starts at looking at your provider and looking at their specialty.
Yeah, I love that. And I love talking about this. I want to ask the question, when would someone do that? When would I say, hey, this is not my normal practice, but I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling, a little bit more anxious, but with everything going on, kind of how do I navigate the differences between where it needs to be elevated now to where I'm not maybe going to a mental health practitioner, or like you said, your primary care, but now I need to see a psychiatrist because now there may really be something going on in my brain.
Yeah, and I think when it interferes with your activity of daily living, when it interferes with you being able to function, getting up in the morning, going to work, a lot of times we let it go too long. And sometimes it's not even an event, it just happens. Sometimes there is an event. And that's perfectly normal to if you have a death in the family, to grieve. But if it goes past a certain amount of time where it's affecting you to actually do activities of daily living, then that's when you need to reach out and get help.
And that's so key. And I think that the key, if it continue on to that, is we have to share these things. We cannot keep silent. One of my taglines I always say is speak up, speak out. and live. You have to speak up, like Lisa's saying. If you're feeling that your daily activities are being changed, and you can't do the normal things, and things that normally would bring you pleasure no longer bring you pleasure, and you're isolating, or you're not getting out of bed, or these other things, or you're always feeling nervous, then you need to talk to your primary care, or even call your therapist, or even try and see if you can get a referral for a psychiatrist if that is the case, so that you have to begin to rule out those things. And like Doc would even say, has your eating habits changed? Let's try all these things. You want to rule out as many things as possible so that you can get it narrowed down to what specifically is the problem, and if this is going to be long term or even short term, because a lot of things that we go through can be short term.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I think too, when you rule out those things, for everybody thinks, well, I don't want to get on medication. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to get on
Mm-mm.
medication. First line of therapy or line of treatment is therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Cognitive behavioral therapy, starting
Mm-hmm.
there. So it might
Mm-hmm.
just being able to contact a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. So we did have another question from Jasmine. She said, "Is there anything you can do daily that can dull anxiety?"
Yeah, so there's lots of things. I'm in education too. And I always tell my students with anxiety, like, because they get a lot of test anxiety. I'm dealing with that a lot. There's a lot of things that you can limit the anxiety. For example, non-pharmacological things like,
Mm-hmm.
monitoring or decreasing the amount of caffeine that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Being able to understand how to meditate or
Mm-hmm.
use guided imagery, those kind of things. And I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of people have anxiety. Yes, there is a pill for it. There's pills for everything, but there are a lot of non-pharmacological things that you can do ahead of time. And I wish some of these, like yoga, meditation, guided imagery,
Yes.
biofeedback, those are things I wish we would teach in secondary education. We need to
Most
teach our
definitely.
Mhm.
kids how, when you're feeling angry, what to do, how to calm yourself down. There's so many apps right now that you can listen to. I used to have my students before a test put on an app that really, and do some deep breathing just to kind of, calm themselves down before going into an exam.
And
Oh, I love that.
there's some great apps. One of the apps is called Breathe, and then
Breathe.
there's
Mhm.
also the Tapping Solutions app as well that can help you out. And those are free apps. But like Lisa's saying, you can journal. Maybe you need to, when you're feeling anxious, and look at what are we anxious about, because anxiety is when you feel you don't have control over things that are to come, or you're
Mhm.
constantly worried about things that have not occurred yet. So we've shared this even in our segments, Portia.
Yeah.
First, take control over those things that you can control. And then you may need to go through and say, okay, why am I feeling anxious about this? And listing out why. What is triggering me in this? And then, does the anxiety I'm feeling match up to the situation that is at hand? If it does not, then we need to examine why is that so, and then put it lower down on your list. Maybe you need to make a list of things so that you're not carrying all these things, because anxiety is like that. Now I'm old. We had that merry-go-round on the playground, and you know how you kept spinning it faster and faster and faster. If we're not careful, anxiety is on the outside of that merry-go-round, spinning our brains faster and faster and faster. And even when we get off the merry-go-round, it takes a minute for our equilibrium to slow back down and catch up with us. So writing
Yeah.
those things down, taking some time to meditate. I go now every Sunday to a salt oasis where I sit in the salt room and just breathe natural Himalaya salt for an hour. And it does amazing things. I get so much done. I slow my thoughts down. I take my pen and pencil in there. It is amazing. So find those things that will help ground you is rule, like Lisa's saying, the rule number one with reducing that anxiety.
I love it where you say teaching, teaching them early. I think about it like I teach my children how to pray, how to do all of these things, but how to calm that down. And I think like for so long, I can only speak to kind of where I am is that we kind of feel like, oh, well, children don't battle that kind of stuff, right? Like you guys know it because you're in the field, but for like just a regular parent, we're like, oh, they're just acting out. Oh, that's just a stage. Oh, and so helping them to journal and things like that. Like my daughter has now understood like declarations and affirmations, right? I'm like, girl, I've been telling you this for years, but whatever, you're learning it. So fine. And the funny thing is like, when I hear her regurgitate it back to me, I'm like, and so for you to say that, it just makes sense that we teach them so that when we are adults, before we even get to adults, we know how to deal with this instead of being in our 30s and 40s, trying to figure out how to do that. But I want to ask a question. What is guided imagery? So I know what guided meditation is, but what is guided imagery? Because I like images. I like seeing stuff. So
yes.
It's a
Do you want to
form
tackle? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a form of meditation where, how I use guided imagery, there's different ways to do it, is to, one, put yourself in a comfortable position and closing your eyes and making sure you block everything out, and then think about a place that makes you happy, where you feel relaxed, and then go through each sense, all your senses. What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you feel? Going through, what do you see? Going through all your senses. And again, there's an app for that as well that can take you through it. Did you want to add to that, Marty?
No, I'm saying, it's your happy place. Mine is always the beach. Imagine your toes in the sand, hear the water, smell the salt in it. Do you hear the seagulls? Do you hear do you feel the sun on your face? Oh yeah, guided imagery, so that you're now taking all that anxiety away and you're going to your safe, happy place. It's great.
So I didn't have a name for that. So funny, because I did my Monday shows, and one of the things I was literally getting ready to teach on Monday is about your goals, and it's like that. It's like if you get to that that goal, what do you? I didn't have a word for it, but y'all just gave me the medical word for it. So now I can be all fancy.
Love it.
Fancy. But I love water too. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. No, a lot of this anxiety happens at night when you're in bed and you're ruminating about things. And that's a time that it can be very useful. Like anything else, it takes practice.
Right.
And again, that is something we need to teach our kids early. 75% of mental health illness happens before the age of 18. 75%.
And I say here, it becomes a learned behavior. We can, if your mom was anxious, and I did this just with a patient last week. I say, where did you learn all this from? Well, my mother was anxious. Oh, okay. So you've been around anxiety. So you grew up thinking that's normal. Well, where did she learn it from? Well, her mother was anxious. So not only was your mother was anxious, but your grandmother was anxious. So anxiety became normal in your life. With that. So trying to, again, taking away and stripping the generational anxiety that comes as well. We are teaching Tony, who's 4. Tony, take a deep breath, breathe. So the other day she said, Daddy, breathe. I'm like, wait a minute. Right. But you can teach your children how to take a deep breath, not to be so anxious, to breathe, to take a time out, to let's sit down. Now, what is bringing and lowering your voice? Now, why are you so anxious? Okay, let's take a deep breath together. Yes. And doing that, it makes all the difference in the world.
I love that. I'm over here breathing right now. I'm like, yes. I'm going through my mind, and like all the times I'm like,
But see how that just
Mommy, just
worked?
breathe.
From
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Mhm.
lowering your voice, getting straight eye
Mhm.
contact, and slowing everything down. Now let's take a deep breath together. It's amazing, and they
It
don't even know that you're doing.
I know, I know.
Mhm.
So with everything that's going on, just because we're still in kids, but I think for children and adults alike, Lisa and Marty, everything that's going on for my kids, they're homeschooled
Mhm,
right now virtually. They're just virtually learning. Um, and so, but other kids are going into school. It's just so much going on for
mhm.
kids and parents alike. And just thinking about just the long-term effects that this can have on our mental health. And, how do we navigate that? And I guess what are some statistics or things that you guys are seeing in your offices and things like that of people coming in because of that and the effects that this is really having on our society as a whole.
Yes, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to the effect of this pandemic and being in closed quarters for long periods of time in isolation, I think it's an individual type of
Mhm,
thing, because you do something based on your comfort level. Of course, going outside is a good way to kind of have some breaks during, if you're scheduling with your kids their academics for the day, have breaks where they're going out and outside for a little while. Also, utilize virtual platforms so that they can get in groups with their friends. Now, I know Zoom, I believe, allows for you to do groups as well.
mhm.
And I think some of the teachers are coming up with some very creative ways to get kids engaged. But I think it depends on the individual. I've had a lot of kids come in lately that are really they really like the online schooling, and not all, but some, because they're introverts
Right.
and they don't have the pressure of being in school because they have social anxiety.
Mhm.
So they're performing better in the online environment. But again, there's a lot of those who are feeling very isolated from their friends.
Yeah.
That's a good observation because you're right. I've noticed that our introverts, and even what I'm finding out, some of the ones, especially our African American boys, who've been labeled
Mhm.
as oppositional defiant or conduct disorder, some of them are doing better on this online platform. Your
Mhm.
introverts and some of those who, so they don't have to do so much confrontation or that type of thing, are doing extremely well on this online platform. Now, your extroverts and those who need the social interaction, it's driving them crazy. And I couldn't survive. It would drive me probably crazy because I need to touch people and talk and do all of that. And I would just take over the screen and all that. So they kicked me out the class. But I totally agree with you, Lisa, in that we have to understand each and individual child in our household. What is their learning style? What is going to help them out in this? I work at a group home, and I was telling them we need snacks out here for these boys. We need cold water. We need brain food out here. Let's get them some
Mm.
crackers. Let's get them some fruit so they can stay engaged in the learning setting. And let's give them some breaks often. Let's do 30 minutes on and 10-minute break, and 30 minutes on and 15-minute break, or something like that, because it's a lot, and we have to help them where they are at so that they can learn in the proper environment.
Yeah, I love that. I think about my parents. I was saying they've been married for 40 years, and one of the things that we saw in our household was that they did go to get help at different times, just
Hmm.
mentally and things like that. And so it wasn't a stigma for me to go
Hmm.
get mental health, but I know it is for so many people
Yes.
even now. And growing up, I had a friend who he was wrestling fun. I mean, he was wrestling and he got hit hard. So they took him to the hospital. But it was like after that happened, then I think there were some behavior things that I think it was just a culmination of the two, because I don't know. But anyway, so when you say 75% of mental illness is diagnosed before 18, he was 15 when he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so I say that because I wonder for us, how do we take care and love and help those family members or friends? At that time, I was so young, I didn't understand, and some of his behavior even toward me, when it really right before he got diagnosed, I was like, this is really strange. This is, and obviously my parents are going to protect me and say, don't talk to him anymore, because we didn't know. And so, but how do we, and then we have some good questions, but how do we help those around us that have mental illness?
Well, let me speak to that. First, in regards to the caregivers, we have to have support for the caregivers. Taking care of someone with a major mental illness is exhausting. It's exhausting.
Yes, it is.
So we have to have the support for the caregivers. And then in regards to something like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, boys start to get negative symptoms anywhere between 10 and 24, 25. So they start out as negative symptoms. So basically, they lose interest. They have no motivation. They don't want to do anything. They isolate themselves. And then they start to get into the positive symptoms. And that's usually when they get diagnosed. And the positive symptoms are the hallucinations, the delusions, the flight of ideas, the lack of ability to understand thought processing. So we have to, I think, and where is everyone but boys between 10 and 24? They're in middle school, elementary, middle, high school, and then college. And I think that's where we need to diagnose early, because research states that if we treat earlier, they can live pretty well normal lives. But when we let it go for so long and they keep having exasperations of these psychotic episodes, that's when it becomes totally irreversible.
And let me say, boys and girls kind of, if we're talking about some of these now more severe, bipolar and schizophrenia, girls can kind of kick in a little bit earlier than boys.
Lady. No, they're later.
Girls are later?
Girls are later.
Okay,
they're later.
Okay. You're right. I had to think about that. You're right. But with that,
there's so many different.
Gets in there.
Bipolar is the girls are earlier, but
yes, bipolar the girls are earlier. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
The girls are later with schizophrenia. Go on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But see, we're seeing a lot of that, especially in colleges. I wish we do a lot better job. Would you agree, Lisa, with that? In our college settings is when we see some of these breakdowns of our boys and even girls too, with that, depending upon what their diagnosis is. So you're seeing a lot of that in our college settings. So I think we definitely need to do a lot better in our high school and college settings with providing necessary mental health services, and even looking at some of the family backgrounds, because we do have this theory that there's bipolar, particularly, is something that is genetic that we want to look into as well, and looking at the cycle of that and maybe what we need to do with helping out as a whole, because it is exhausting on the whole family with it, because it can take the whole family down if we're not careful.
So I'm sorry, I just got word from our resident question asker. So he wanted, so we know the ages between boys, but you were saying like checking on them in college, and he was saying checking on our boys that are in like a juvenile hall or in prisons and stuff like that. Are they checked in there? And I would assume not, but just wanting to see how is that working with our boys that are, in juvenile hall or in jail and prisons.
Oh my goodness. So I could talk a long time
Right.
about this issue. um, the okay, let me start at the beginning. We
Mm-hmm.
have what we call ADHD, which usually Caucasian children are diagnosed with. In a vulnerable population or a lower socioeconomic school district, they're not ADHD, they're conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, and they might have the same or symptoms. So that's number one. Number two, a lot of these young people in juvenile detention centers are actually, I would say most of them have mental illnesses. And we
Mm-hmm.
are not doing anything to help them. We're not. We're actually exasperating the mental illness where they're actually being traumatized in these
Mm-hmm.
facilities. Traumatized. So we're just adding to it. That's all we're doing. And it's just we go from one place to another. Juvenile detention to the prison. It's almost a direct connect.
Wow. I wonder if, how you say it starts out like some of the reasons why they're in juvenile hall is because there's mental illness. And so I wonder about when we talk about the recidivism rate and why, they're like, it's so high and things like that is because they never got the help, that being behind bars really wasn't the answer. But if you could have taken them to a psychiatrist or had their brain looked at, that maybe this was it. It's so funny. I'm going to send you this TED Talk, Lisa, because the guy said that. He talks about that, about the fact that that so many men in jail, that the issues are mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so you never checked for that. Nobody ever did it. So they're doing these things and obviously they're going to jail and then they're getting out, but they're doing the same thing. And so go ahead, Marty, because I know you have something to say.
Oh,
No, I
go
was
ahead,
saying,
Marty.
yeah, that's part of the misinterpretation when we're talking about defunding police. We're not saying take money away from necessarily the police department itself. Well, we're saying we want to also improve mental health services, because in often cases, the police should not be the first point of being called, because what we do when we see someone who has an episode, we call the police instead of here in San Bernardino County. We do have the crisis response team that can come out, and I've had to call them when I was over at a charter school that took kids from 16 to 24. I would call the crisis response team instead of calling the police when they were violent, because there's something in the eyes that you can see that this is a mental. There is, Lisa, you
Mm-hmm.
understand. You see the eyes, look in their eyes, and most time when they're schizophrenic, listen, I used to be scared of them, but you just talk to them rational. What is going on? Why are you acting that way? Can we talk? Let's talk this through, with that, and let's call the crisis response team and not necessarily the police, so that we can get them on a 72-hour, on a week, whatever type of hold we need to get them in psychiatric care, we can, so that we can get them on the right path. And those with schizophrenia and those that are treated bipolar, some of these ones we like to think are more severe, can live healthy and normal lives with proper treatment from their psychiatrist, proper treatment from their therapist, and the integrative approach of that.
I love
Right.
that. You always
I
talk about that
tell,
integrative approach.
Mm-hmm.
I tell the parents, Marty, that when you have a child with a major mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
go to your local police station and put his name or her name down and
That's
say,
it.
if you ever get a call about this
Good
individual, I want the CIT, Crisis Intervention
team.
Response Team, to come and respond, because they have the training to
Yes.
de-escalate the situation. So
I
because if not, they don't know.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, we've seen it. I think it was a couple years ago, a young man outside. I think he didn't have on any clothes and it just
Mm-hmm.
ended badly, but he
Mm-hmm.
was like bipolar. I do want to stop for a minute. And I want to say this just because I know the topic is very heavy, but I do want to say that this show is intended as an educational tool. It is not a substitute for medical advice
Right.
about yourself or someone else. If you need medical advice, see your medical providers. If you have an emergency, call 911 or go to the nearest hospital. Thank
Most
you, Marty,
definitely.
for that disclaimer. I just wanted to make sure we put that out. But I want to get to a couple of questions. So I don't, Pam said she's going to forever need a support group. So I think Pam may have a team that has developed some things over, she said overnight, but now hindsight, I see how educators and health pros and families could have recognized this. So, Lisa, I love that you said, if something's going on, kind of go to your police department.
Yes.
You also started out by saying that caretakers need support, and
Mm-hmm.
so are there some things that the caretakers, are there groups that they can see? Are there things that they can do?
Yeah, there's a group actually. Oh my goodness, I can't remember the name. Out in California, her name is Kathy Day. She's an advocate for NAMI. She's an advocate. She's on social media. Her name's Kathy Day. You can find her on Facebook. You can find her on LinkedIn. But she has a nonprofit organization that provides resources and support for caregivers, and she's out in California.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And then I want to go over to Paula. So Paula had a great question. She said, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? What are some of the early signs? Is it hereditary? I know that's a lot.
Well, Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. So you
Mm-hmm.
have dementia, and Alzheimer's is I guess under the umbrella there. And there's what we call early stage or Alzheimer's, and then you have later stage. I don't know, a lot of people don't understand that there's an early onset Alzheimer's, which can happen literally in your late 40s, 50s, usually 50s. There's a movie called Still Alice that goes through the highlights of early stage Alzheimer's disease. That really portrays that nicely. But there are also I don't know if there's controversy about the 23andMe and all that, but I had it done. And there is actually strains that you can find out if you have the genetic component. There's like 3 genetic components, kind of like the same thing with like breast cancer, whether or not you have that gene.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you want to do something like that, there is some tests that you can do to see if you're prone to get Alzheimer's disease. But, a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm getting dementia, I'm getting Alzheimer's when they start to have memory issues. Well, it's kind of different with dementia and Alzheimer's. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just memory issues, it's like putting your keys in the refrigerator. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't belong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but the statistics, I don't have them right now, but the statistics for Alzheimer's is growing vastly. But there's a lot of research being done to look for, because there is not not a there's treatment,
Right.
like Aricept to help with memory, but there's not a cure for
Sure.
Alzheimer's. But there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of research. I know they're close.
Yeah. And so go ahead.
No,
'Cause
no. I found that place you were talking about, Lisa. The Pro Caregivers Consultants. Is that it that you were talking? Yes, Pro Caregivers Consultant. And when we're talking about even with those who have dementia, Alzheimer's, and all that, families need support with that too,
Mhm,
because those are family. They bring the whole family in. When
mhm.
you're dealing with a lot of mental health disorders, do affect the entire family and can exhaust the family and exhaust all of your resources as well if you're not careful.
Mhm.
So we have to have these conversations about what do we do? How do we properly care for that family member? What is going to be the best, not just for them, it's primarily for them, but for us as well. And keeping those conversations, we can't no longer push them underneath the carpet and act as if they don't exist.
Yeah. So it sounds like, Lisa, like kind of like the BRCA, where you could test for like breast
Yeah.
cancer and I think ovarian cancer and just those cancers that kind of have that gene. And so is there anything that we can do health wise to, I guess, either mitigate that or slow that down by diet or anything like that? Or there's no studies or research done to support that?
Well, actually, your diet is definitely a part of that. But Sudoku, I don't know if you've heard that, but
Mhm.
Sudoku puzzles to keep your brain just
Yes.
um,
Active.
critically thinking, looking at different problems. So I know a lot of professors, they do Sudoku in their office because they're like, I can't get Alzheimer's. I can't have any cognitive issues. That's where my bread and butter comes from. So definitely diet, exercise, and if as usual, that helps with physical and mental issues.
Yeah, I love that. So it's funny because Sudoku, I mean, I've always seen it and I'm like, does this really help? But now your girl's going to be out here doing her Sudoku, her 4, 2, 3, 1, 8, 9, whatever. Just to keep the, like, even, I think even not even being fearful of that, but just the cognitive stuff. So I think this is so good. Marty, what was the name of that place? It was Pro Caregivers.
Pro Caregivers Consultant.
Okay, Pro Caregivers Consultant. So I want to make sure I link some of this because you guys have given some great information and some great resources. So I do want to see if I want to go through, see if there's any more questions that people have. I love this conversation because I think it just helps out with, the stigma. And I want to talk a little bit about that too, Lisa. I know you actually train practitioners. You've been in this for 20 years. What is the stigma with just, especially in the Black community with like mental, I think it's twofold that I have this question is one, why we don't go see someone ourselves, and two, why do we wait so late to have our children seen as well? Is it just, out of sight, out of mind? Like, I don't know. Then it'll just go away. What are some of the things that you see or you believe, just in your 20 years on why there is such a stigma and why we do wait too late to take our loved ones?
I think mental health is not addressed in the brown and Black communities because we've always had to overcome different diversities, and we've done that through prayer, through communities.
Right.
And so we're kind of set in that type of mindset versus not to say that doesn't help. But I think, again, it has to come back to educating the community.
Yeah, I think we talk about this all the time, Marty. Some of these things are just like the integrative approach. It feels like it's so much, right? Because we have to get the whole medical community into agreeing with that integrative approach. I go to my doctor and I mean, I go to my doctor and I never see that, right? With Doc being on here, we get to see that because he has nutrition in his office. He has a mental health professional in his office. He has just this like integrative approach. But for a lot of people, they don't have that. So being able to say, hey, your doctor may not be saying this, but go see this person or go see that person. I think that's important.
Yes. And you as the individual have the right to say, hey, doc, primary care doctor, I'm seeing a therapist and I want to give you permission. I want to sign an informed consent that the two of you talk to each other about my condition. So you don't have to wait for them. You can initiate it yourself so that you're on the same page with the health. And it does so much better in that regards too. So go ahead and initiate it. Tell your therapist, hey, I want you to talk to my primary care doctor so that you understand, so that we're all on the same page with that and vice versa. So you as the patient have the privilege and to make that suggestion and to insist upon it as well. You don't have to wait for them to initiate it. You initiate it yourself.
Absolutely. One thing Pamela wanted to know was pro caregiver consultant. Is that NAMI?
I don't know if they're part of NAMI or not. No,
No,
they're
no,
Okay.
no, but she, Kathy Day is the founder of that
mhm.
foundation, and she is on PsychU, a representative, I think, on their board of PsychU, and also does a lot with NAMI.
Okay. Excellent. I love that. So, I think one thing I do want to ask Lisa as we wrap up is just like I've been kind of talking about this traumatic event after traumatic event. I think for me, like even the stuff that happened with Jacob Blake, I honestly was like, I can't. I can't hear it. I can't watch it. I'm tired of seeing the different. I'm tired of Black people being a political statement. I'm just tired. I'm tired.
Mhm.
And you see the protesters out there and the people that are doing the work. There's a friend of mine that does some work with Inspired Justice, and they are always out there and always. And I'm just, I wonder what these long-term effects are
Mm.
on people. It's funny. I heard about this survey or this research that somebody did on the Jewish community as it relates to the Holocaust. However, there was no research done to Black people who dealt with slavery. But I do want to know, like, what are some of the long-term effects that, like, trauma over trauma,
Mhm.
what does that have? And then how do we navigate this? Honestly, how do we navigate this trauma over trauma and just at least gain some sense of normalcy or,
Yeah, and I think, like I said earlier, that we have to be very mindful that the mental health component is part of your holistic care. And if
Mhm.
we don't treat individuals, then there are two different paths. One, it's going to lead to usually serious mental illnesses, lead
Mhm.
to death or in the prison system. So it has to be addressed. And one of the
Yes.
first things I do in my assessment is ask about trauma,
Mhm.
and go through their childhood and look at that trauma, because our brains develop are between the ages, I mean, particularly between the ages of 3, 4, up to 11.
Right.
And our personalities are formed by that age. And if we have any trauma during that time, that affects us as adults.
It really
Yeah.
does, and I think you're right because one of the things we always go through, most of the diagnosis goes back to your childhood. and
Hmm.
and 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 unaddressed trauma from your childhood. I was just on the phone last night at 10 o'clock last night with a college student who was having some major trauma that something triggered him from his childhood. Even though he had addressed it and got help, everything just kind of flashed back. And it had to be addressed then so that, so he felt some sort of normalcy in that.
Yeah, I agree. Pamela said, I believe everyone needs to speak out and lend their voice to communities that don't talk about it. As a parent, she shares.
Yes.
Sounds like she shares her story. And I think that's important is that we share these stories, that we share, that people that look like you, I go get help. I
Hmm.
I am an executive pastor. I'm the first lady. I go get help. I
Hmm.
pray and I go get help. And I think it's important. And I say that because not just in the Black community, but especially in the kingdom, in the church. And so if you need that help, go get that help, and
Hmm.
I think it's very important that it's okay. It doesn't, like you said, Marty, it does not make you weak.
Right.
Listen, I deployed twice to Iraq. Hello. And the first time it was when George W. Bush signed an order that we were going to war. And I sat in a vehicle for 14 days from Kuwait to Iraq. I had to pull real duty. There was real fear. So listen,
Wow.
if you want to call somebody weak, I'm not the one. And I
Right.
go and get me some help. So I was in the middle
Come
of
on.
war, sitting in bunkers, ready to take people out. I was like, God, I don't want to, but if I have to, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
And dealing with rockets and mortars coming into the bases
Mm.
where we were, and having to leave and put your vest on and your helmet on and go into bunkers because you
Mhm.
didn't know if it was going to hit. And sometime it hit really close. And I say that because there's no weakness in going to get help.
Right.
There's no weakness. There's nothing weak about this vet. You hear me?
That's
So
right. And
I
in fact,
say
it
that.
shows your strength that you were strong enough to say, I need help, and it's okay.
Mhm, mhm.
That's wow. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I just say that to share, that just go get the help that you need. Lisa and Marty, I am so happy to have you guys on. Thank you for sharing with us. You've gave me so much. I was writing down stuff because I want to share it back with the community. Some of the links, some of the things that you said, the feedback, the
Yes.
guided meditation, breathing, tapping solutions, all of that stuff. So my mom, tell them, baby. Come on, mommy.
Proud mama.
Yes, and my daddy said, amen. My father was a soldier too. So Pam said, I'm grateful for your service. Thank you. Thank you. But you guys, I don't want to leave Lisa without, how can we just stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so I actually have an email. I'm working on getting my own practice. That's in the making.
Ooh.
So I'd have to leave you
And she'll
with
be
an
helping us
email.
out here in California.
So, feel free to email me at lgaloni, which is LGHILONI @gmail.com
And you have
with any
Facebook.
questions, any mental health questions.
Okay, and that's LGH.
LGHILONI.
Okay, at gmail.com.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay. Excellent. So if you guys want to get in touch with Lisa, that is her email address. And she is getting ready to listen. She getting ready to start her own practice. We want to support. Lisa, let us know when you are starting that practice. We want to make sure we put it out. Girl, get you a Facebook page so we can go like it. Give us some great information. Listen at me. Look at me.
I have to catch up with my big brother.
Listen. Listen, she got the PhD behind her name. I'm just Marty comes after mine.
Stop it. So Marty, how can we keep in touch with you?
Yes, definitely. Definitely you can reach me on my webpage at mentalhealthmarty.com. So excited about that. And then, of course, through my podcast, through none other than Portia Scott Media, and definitely at Mental Health Matters with Marty on our podcast. We would love for you to give us a 5-star rating and check out this. I just completed season 1. So excited about that on our podcast, on any podcast venue.
I'm so excited about that. Yay! We finished season 1.
We finished season 1.
Wow.
Thank you.
So everyone, I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining. Lisa, Marty, thank you so much for your time. I think I always think about the amount of time that clients have to pay for this hour, and we're getting it for free. So I appreciate it so very much. And I know the community does as well. Before we go, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that tomorrow, Wake Up and Show Up Live, we'll be back at 12 p.m. Eastern time. I'm super excited because we are talking about not losing focus. And so making sure that you keep your focus. So we will be right back here, especially if you are subscribed to Portia Scott Media. on YouTube, you will know when we're going live. And if you subscribe to the community, I know Daryl will put the number up, and that you can just text the word hello to 404-737-0867. Even if you have text wake up to 31996, I need you to text this, because that particular platform that we're using, we are no longer going to use that platform, and we're going over to another platform. So if you text the word hello to 404-737-0867. I also put the link in the Facebook description of this video. So you guys know how we do it. We end every single show with this declaration: waking up is automatic, showing up is intentional. Today, I will show up.